so set up. That's my plate right there. Okay, so when setting up, okay, so we're going to talk about the setup here. So some players like to be a little bit wider. Some players a little narrow, like what's his name? He used to play for the Dodgers, Cody Bellinger. He's really upright, right? Anybody remember Jeff Bagwell? Right? Some guys remember the old what's his name? Julio Franco with the bat, right? So there's all kinds of different setups. At the end of the day, the setup isn't the big deal. They can be a little bit narrow, or they can be a little bit more athletic. They can be a little bit more open or a little bit more closed. At the end of the day, and I'll start over, but at the end of the day, it's all about right here at the point of contact. What are you doing right here at the point of contact? All the other stuff is just the starting mechanism and how they're loading. Now, what we don't want is too much head movement, shoulder movement, bat movement at the beginning of the setup, right? Into the load. Okay, so the setup with the feet does not make a whole bunch of difference, right? Exactly how wide, it's what's comfortable. Okay, hands should probably be somewhere about chest to ear, depending on how high and what the player is doing or not doing. Okay, I like for my players to start kind of right at the head level, so they have a little bit of hand load up. I don't like them to start too far down, because then it's too much movement up, and too much movement, whether it's head movement, shoulder movement, eye movement, hand movement, load movement. The more movement in there as they get set up and start to load into their swing, the more variables you're adding to the equation. And if you guys remember math, the more variables you have, the harder it is to solve the equation. So we want to try to get as little movement as possible, but we still need to load to get ready. Okay, so setting up the feet, how athletic? I like my players to be a little bit more engaged into the legs right away so that they feel that back leg load. Okay, hands somewhere around the head, shoulder, ears, with a little bit of hand load and back leg load. Okay, so loading that back leg, just like we talked about in the pitching clinic, is getting that energy. When we load into that back leg, we're actually pushing into the ground, which is really important. Okay, that pushing into the ground gives you back energy. Okay, last time we talked about this from a throwing perspective. It's the same concept, right? That is what's called a normal force. The more energy we can push into the ground, the more energy the ground gives us back, and we can get that back out through our swing, right? So if a lot of players are upright and they don't get that load in, they're not going to get that energy out of the ground. So you know, and let me give two different examples here. If we look at Altuve, who's maybe an inch taller than I am, probably 20 pounds heavier than I am, right? Same size, same body type though. Why is it that he can hit the way he does, and he can hit like a pull holes kind of player when he needs to, right? It's because he knows how to load into the ground and get that energy out of the ground and then rotate into his swing, right? So you don't have to be big, you don't have to be strong to hit the baseball. You just have to know how to execute the mechanics and get that energy from where it needs to come from. And it's all into that load, into the back leg, and how we're going to drive and get that energy that's going into the ground and then back out to the ground, and do it in a quick rotational way. Okay, so we got the setup, we got the load, and then we got the trigger. Okay, so this is all leading into the rotational mechanics. Okay, so load is going to be a hand load up, right? And the hand load should be going upward, not downward, right? But it should be going upward, and I'll explain why that's important. We should be getting that back leg load, and then we're going to trigger into the baseball. Now, if you look, my hands haven't quite moved yet. This should be triggering first, right? So a lot of players that I see, especially as they younger and younger players, is they will initiate with the hands first, because they think the hitting is in the hands and it's in the bat. It ain't nothing in there. Okay, just give me a raise of hands. How many attended the throwing? You guys remember the 10% examples I gave? No different in hitting, right? So in throwing, what I explained was that throwing is only 10% of the arm. And I gave two examples to explain that, from a mass perspective and from a distance perspective, right? So all the energy is coming from the ground up. So this is a key concept to get across to your players, whether they're throwing, pitching, or hitting, or even infield. You should be working everything from the ground up. That means creating energy into the ground so that the ground gives it back to you, and then it's coming up through the body, through the connect chain, and out through the bat or out through the arm when you're throwing. Okay, so going back again, a lot of young hitters will initiate with the hands, right? Now, look at how small they are. Some of them are what, maybe 60, 70 pounds?
50.
50 pounds, right? That bat is more likely to swing them than they are to swing the bat, okay? So, why are they using the smallest parts of their body, which are those arms? They should be firing from the legs, okay? So, let's go back again. We're gonna set up, load, hand load, leg load back into that. We're gonna trigger into that, and that trigger is going to start to get that energy coming back up through the kinetic chain and into the front leg. Boom! Snapping that front leg. Okay, so that's the trigger here. This is what's called a Power V, and I'll send out my website that shows all the Hall of Fame pro guys with the exact same Power V, stiff front leg. And this right here is the rotational part of the mechanics. And what you're doing is you're getting the energy that you're putting into the ground, it's coming out, boom, and it's snapping into rotation, and it's popping the hip, it's locking this in and snapping that power through right here, and you just need to get your hands to the ball. That's it. Right? So it's not in the hands, it's not in the bat, it's all from the legs, from the ground up, in terms of the rotational mechanics. Okay, so let's go again. Load, trigger, point of contact. Now at point of contact, we're looking for two things. Palm up, palm down. We're not extending through, we're not rolling over. At contact, we're going palm up, palm down. We're staying connected, elbow up against the body right here, okay, and we're working inside the ball. So if this is the pitcher throwing the baseball right here to the plate, and here's the ball in the middle of the plate right here, okay, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. One concept that is a right concept, but the wrong language to use is square up the ball. That's horrible language. You as the coach know exactly what that means, but to the player it means something a little bit different. The younger they are, the more they're going to take that literally, okay? Now, if that's the baseball right there in that spot, okay, when I load, trigger, point of contact, I am not squaring up the ball. I'm working inside the baseball. So here's where my bat actually is, right here. Okay, so look at the bat lag that I have. It's not square, it's got bat lag. Okay, now anybody have an idea why we want to hit inside the baseball versus squaring it up at contact? Got a baseball?
I think they're in there. One thing I want to point out also.
Not quite, but you're kind of on the right track. Go ahead, Warren.
No, what I was going to say is what Casildo's talking about, and what I think, and this is more towards our younger players, is that the balance is key, and that straight front leg, keeping that weight distributed evenly, more so on the back leg, because we see a lot of the youngers, they're up here.
Yes. They're
up here, not back here. So that's one thing we want to work on as for the younger players, but I'll let you finish now.
Yeah, so let me take a step back. I know what Warren's getting at here is, what I'm explaining here is a very high school, college level. We're going to try to dial that back for the younger players so that we can take some of this and help you guys as coaches to apply it to the younger players. But you have to understand this first before you take some of this back to what a younger player needs to do, right? Okay, so let me go back and go through. Okay, we're going to load, we're going to trigger, point of contact right in here, palm up, palm down. We should have a slightly bent front elbow. Back elbow should be tucked. This is staying connected, and we're working inside the baseball right here. So I asked a question, why do we work inside instead of squaring it up? Well, it's all about physics. That'll be the hint.
There's no power.
Well, there can be some power, but let me explain the physics of what happens. If a player squares it up right here, Okay, the ball's coming in with some velocity. The bat is already moving. As the ball comes and we square it up perfectly, what happens is the baseball compresses against the bat. And it actually compresses such that the ball, it compresses into like a half a ball. But at the same time, the bat is still moving during that compression phase. By the time it starts to decompress and turn into a regular baseball, here's where the ball goes off. So if you tell a player to square it up, they're actually going to end up pulling the ball shortstop, third base area, because of the physics of what's happening on the baseball, on the bat for that short period of time. If we adjust it and we work inside right here's where the compression starts, compression, decompression, and it goes up the middle. So it's all about the physics of what's happening between the baseball and the bat, of why we want to work inside. And by working inside, if we're slightly late, we're still kind of going oppo. If we're slightly early, we're probably going left center field. So we're working, by staying inside the baseball, we're working line to line, gap to gap, instead of that 1/3 of the field. Now, if you have a really good hitter and he's hitting it square and he's pulling the ball, so let's say he hits 400 in your league, okay? But if he's only using 1/3 of the field, what's his batting average? What's 1/3 of 400? Let's say he's even a 600 hitter. What's 1/3 of 600?
200.
He's a 200 hitter because he's only using 1/3 of the field. Now, his hits are going to look fantastic, but you understand kind of the mathematical concept of what I'm trying to get across. A really good hitter is going to go line to line, gap to gap. He's going to be able to hit inside pitch, outside pitch, low and away pitch. And where do all pitchers want to pitch as they get older and as they get better? Low and away. Okay, so the language is really important. Work inside the baseball. Boom. And I'll show you on my website. I've got Pujols, McGuire, Bonds, Tony Gwynn, George Brett, Chipper Jones, all the Hall of Famers, and you're going to see at contact, they're all Buster Posey's. He really over exaggerates. You know, all those hits he gets to right field, working inside the baseball. Okay, they all work inside the baseball, and that's why they were all 300+ hitters throughout their careers. Right? They're not getting around the baseball. So this is square. This is inside the baseball. Okay. Now, when a player initiates with the hands, they're going to come around the baseball. Okay, that's when you lose power because you're no longer connected in here and you're kind of coming off the back leg a little bit. Okay, so we back it up again. Let's start over. So setup, whatever's comfortable for the player. Load, okay, as minimal bat movement as possible, as little variation with the bat here, as little head and shoulder movement is what we should be trying to emphasize with the players. Okay, but once we load, trigger, point of contact. Okay, next from right there is going to be the extension. Now we're extending. Once we made contact, now we're going to be extending. And what I teach my players is we're going right over the pitcher's head, pointing to center field over there, and we're going to finish towards the back pocket. Okay, so one of the things I see with a lot of young players is if they initiate with the hands, problem number one. Once that happens, then problem number two is we're around the ball. Now, once we're around the ball, we're going to just come off here and we're going to pull the shoulder off. So if you can help a player by noticing that they're initiating with the hands first and not with the legs, and the hands are what is called casting. They're casting out. Okay, when you see that, that's going to lead to 2 or 3 more problems in their swing. And for you to say, well, don't pull your shoulder out. Well, sorry, that's going to happen no matter what because they already started it here, then here, then here. You got to help them as early as possible in the swing to recognize the problems. Okay, so let's go through again. The rotational mechanics is going to be, okay, load, trigger, right? Load, trigger. Now the rotational is going to be how do we get the rotational aspect of that going? Boom. So if you notice, my hands are not moving and doing any work. It's all the back leg that's rotating the hands through, and I'm just staying inside the ball. So it's almost like it's set here, boom, straight down on the ball, bam, right? As quick as possible. So the rotation is all in the back leg rotating. There's several variations on what's happening on the back foot, back leg, but as long as it's rotating. Okay, so I think at the younger levels, saying squish the bug, that's fine, right? Rotating that back foot. So some will stay ball of the foot and just rotate, that's fine, even though it's not quite as quick. Some will come off the toe, onto the toe, that's fine. And if you are like a Bryce Harper or the Big Hurt, what's his name, Frank Thomas, he's gonna come off, that's fine too. It's rotating and the hip is firing. What we don't want to see, and you're gonna see this a lot, right, is the foot gets stuck. Ugh, it doesn't move. It doesn't move, okay? Or it barely comes off and then the heel goes back down. If the heel goes back down, what's happening to the hip? The hip's no longer rotating and the hip is shifting back. There's no power. We want full rotation, boom. And what I like to teach my players is this knee has to rotate into this knee and snap it, where this gets a straight leg and this gets a power V, bam. What's gonna happen there is the energy just goes bam, straight through up to the kinetic chain. Okay, so